Let's talk about Kamala Harris and whether she can beat Donald Trump.
Bring it on.
She's the former Attorney General of California, a former U.S. Senator, the current Vice President, and the last-minute pick to be the Democratic Party's presidential candidate after Joe Biden dropped out.
The old era is over, and the new era is here. It is go time.
If she wins, Kamala Harris would become the first woman, the first black woman, and the first South Asian American to hold the top job.
You are witnessing the birth of a cultural phenomenon, and you need a cultural phenomenon to stop a cultural phenomenon. Donald Trump is a cultural phenomenon.
Kamala, you're fired. Get out of here. You're fired.
I will proudly put my record against his any day of the week.
So how has Kamala Harris shaken up the race? What are the big issues playing out in her campaign? And what are her chances of winning the election on November 5th? It's been a crazy election cycle already. We've had one candidate convicted of a felony, a disastrous presidential debate, an assassination attempt, and an incumbent president pulling out of the race. Kamala Harris replacing Joe Biden is the latest twist, and it's injected new momentum into the Democratic Party's campaign. A clear sign of that was all the donations that poured in the first 36 hours after Biden endorsed Harris.
1.1 million people uniquely donated to the campaign in that time frame. 62% of those 1.1 million donors, that's the first time they gave this election cycle to the presidential campaign.
People feel a sense of excitement that just wasn't there when Biden was on the top of the ticket running against Trump.
And you can see a lot of that excitement online.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? Project Coconut, baby. Woo!
Hey, Kamala, what are we going to say to Donald Trump in November?
Bye, bye, bye.
So there is this big buzz around Harris, but all the polls so far suggest it's going to be a super tight race. The question for the Democrats is whether they can turn that enthusiasm into enough votes in the right places. Because let's remind ourselves what it actually takes to win a presidential election in the US. It doesn't necessarily come down to getting the most votes overall. It's all about what's called the Electoral College. Every state has an assigned number of Electoral College votes, and the results in each state determine how many of those votes go to each candidate. 270 is the majority, so that's the number the candidates are chasing to win. Now, some states pretty much always go to the Republicans, so-called red states, and others reliably go to the Democrats, the blue states. Then there are the states that tend to swing between the two parties, and they're the key to getting to 270. In this election, there are 7 main ones, which both campaigns will focus on.
In our system, really campaigns are math, right? So it is getting to that electoral college vote. And these battleground states are the path. They're the math to get there. They are won by very thin margins, tens of thousands of votes in some of these places.
We've got some work to do, but we're not afraid of hard work. We like hard work, don't we? And we will win this election.
So how could she do it? Well, here are 5 factors that are playing into her campaign. Let's start with the age factor, the issue that 81-year-old Biden just couldn't shake off. Kamala Harris is 59, so one of the biggest vulnerabilities for the Democrats has now become a strength. Donald Trump, who's 78, is now the old guy in this contest. And one of the Republicans' main lines of attack just isn't relevant anymore.
I think they're definitely on the back foot. All of their messaging was on Joe Biden's age, on his cognitive abilities or lack thereof. They're going to have to pivot.
It also seems that Kamala Harris has captured the imagination of a lot of young people, a really important voting bloc. She was labeled Brat by the pop star Charli XCX. FYI, Brat is the name of her latest album, and it's becoming a trending meme about being a little chaotic and just being yourself. And Gen Z has run with it.
Coconut. 666 to the Princess Street. Coconut.
Hey, as somebody who had to look up Brett today, I'm understanding, how important this is. But listen, putting that label on her, it means authenticity, it means energy.
And there are signs that that energy is translating into something tangible. Right after Harris entered the race, there was a spike in voter registrations. More than 80% were between 18 and 34.
Young people who felt kind of disengaged from the process were suddenly thinking, you know what, I feel like voting again.
That said, the Trump campaign is also trying to reach young voters. And Trump's pick for vice president is actually younger than Harris.
Donald Trump also named his running mate at the RNC convention. That energized a number of younger Republicans out there too.
Next up is what we're calling the woman factor. And there are a few things to untangle here. First is to remember that women voters are another important demographic for any candidate, especially in those swing states.
We've always known that suburban women are likely to decide this election. Young women are going to decide this election. And white women, college-educated women, could decide this election. This is another advantage and a strength that she's playing to.
Having said that, Donald Trump has already beat a woman to the White House, Hillary Clinton, back in 2016. And plenty of women do support Trump. But a few things have changed since he ran against Clinton, including the fact that he's been found liable for sexual abuse in a civil trial.
Trump weaponized gender norms against Hillary Clinton. I don't think he's going to be able to do that successfully this term, primarily because he's been convicted of sexual assault. Trump's behavior towards women is not an unknown, and it's rather misogynistic, it's patriarchal, and how Donald Trump treats Kamala Harris will have implications for how this key demographic of swing voters will vote in November.
And then there's the issue of reproductive rights. Polls show that access to abortion is a big concern for a lot of voters, particularly women. And Kamala Harris has been a leading voice on that issue for the Democrats.
The right of every woman in every state in this country to make decisions about her own body is on the line. And I've said it before and I will say it again. How dare they?
In 2022, the Supreme Court overturned a landmark case, Roe v. Wade, which had protected abortion as a constitutional right. It was something many Republican politicians had been pushing for years, and it was the judges appointed by Trump while he was president that swung the decision, leading to abortion bans in many Republican-led states.
We've seen in polling, we've seen this in referendums in red states, that Americans are really unhappy with the extreme bans on abortion. And so Republicans don't really want to touch this. They know that it's a losing issue for them.
Reproductive freedoms could decide this election. The fact that a woman now is the top of the ticket, and this is one of her key issues, is going to attract women, whether they are Republican or Democrat.
Next up, how race might play into this election. Kamala Harris has mixed heritage. Her parents were both immigrants. Her mother came from India and her father's Jamaican. It's hard to judge how her background might affect the vote. Some Republicans have drawn attention to it by referring to her as the DEI pick, which stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
So it's this idea that the Democrats are playing identity politics, that there's this calculation that Kamala Harris should be president because of her identity, without giving any credence to her qualifications.
And Trump himself actually questioned Harris's racial identity at a conference of Black journalists.
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was Black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn Black, and now she wants to be known as Black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she Black?
It was the same old show. The divisiveness and the disrespect. The American people deserve better.
And there are signs that Harris is already galvanizing huge support among Black voters and other minority groups. There was one video call led by Black women in support of Harris, where 90,000 people tried to join in, and it raised $1.5 million in just 3 hours. Another call led by Black men raised more than $1.3 million.
There was a real concern that there were a number of particularly Black men who might be moving to vote for the Republican ticket this election cycle. And so this is a huge signal that having Kamala on the top of the ballot has mobilized Black voters, which is a key demographic group for Democrats. Democrats will not win an election with just Black people, but they will lose an election if there are not Black people supporters. So Kamala has already proven that she can re-energize a base that the Democrats so desperately need if they want to win in November.
Another area where Harris seems to be stronger than Biden is her ability to go on the attack against Trump and the optics around her being a former prosecutor running against a convicted felon.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
She can prosecute the case, the political case, and the economic case against Donald Trump. So it changes the dynamic there.
Last on our list is Harris's policy record. Now, she's been in high-profile positions for a pretty long time, so there's lots of stuff that people can refer to, like her time as San Francisco's district attorney and California's attorney general. She's had mixed reviews, including accusations from some people that she was too harsh on issues like drug convictions and criminalizing the parents of kids who skip school.
It's not as if she's this complete unknown, but there also gives Republicans a lot of chance to really try to delve into her record in California and paint her as this California liberal who will always kowtow to the left. And that doesn't tend to play well, obviously, with these folks who are in these 7 swingy states, I call them.
Then there's Harris's record on the other big issues featuring in this election. There's abortion, which, as we mentioned, her campaign will push as one of her strengths. There's also the economy, where as vice president, Harris is basically tied to Biden's record. Trump's arguing that the economy is in really bad shape, and a lot of people are struggling because of inflation. But Harris will try to emphasize things like high levels of employment, providing debt relief for students, and the fact that inflation has started to slow down. A trickier sell for Harris is her record on illegal immigration, which Trump and the Republicans are going big on. Record numbers of migrants have crossed illegally into the U.S. from Mexico during Biden's presidency, and he specifically tasked Harris to work with governments in Central America to address the root causes to bring the numbers down.
Do not come. Do not come.
Kamala had one job, and that was to fix the border. Now imagine her in charge of the entire country.
She launched a colossal illegal alien invasion of a country. She said, come on in, remember?
Where she's lost, there's no question, has been on immigration. There's no question that she said, do not come. And millions of people came anyways. And they came in record numbers by the hundreds of thousands. And that has been a problem for the Biden administration.
Now, those domestic issues will probably weigh most heavily on voters' minds. But Kamala Harris will also be tested on foreign policy. Things like the U.S.'s relationship with China, support for Ukraine, and where she stands on Israel and the war in Gaza, which is a particularly polarizing issue. Now, some people frame Harris's position on Gaza as slightly different to Biden. They say she's done more to highlight the humanitarian catastrophe.
We cannot look away in the face of these tragedies. We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering, and I will not be silent.
That might help her pick up voters who've been alienated by Biden's approach, or potentially lead to her losing some pro-Israel voters.
Gaza, which has been a drain on the president, not only in terms of Arab voters in Michigan, but also in terms of Black, Latino, Asian, young people, where you were seeing 15, 20% attrition, and people saying that it was Gaza that was causing them to drop off. Now, the vice president has been far more empathetic on Palestinian issues.
She was the first person to really come out and force the Biden administration to call a spade, to say, these videos are horrific. The way that Palestinians are being treated is horrific. The problem is that could come back and hurt her with a lot of the Jewish Democratic voters. And there are an enormous number of them that may actually go to Donald Trump because of those policies.
Among pro-Palestinians, many don't differentiate between her position and Biden's and see her as just as much a part of the pro-Israel establishment.
Stop the genocide! 15,000 children died because of you! Stop the genocide! You're a murderer!
If you just scratch a little bit at the surface of Kamala Harris's record, even prior to becoming vice president, you see someone who was vociferously pro-Israel.
So those are some of the main themes being talked about in the run-up to November. But there's one other key question that Kamala Harris will have to contend with, and that's whether the U.S. is ready for a woman president. It's a question with no easy answers. People asked it when Hillary Clinton lost to Trump. But that was 8 years ago. Since then, some things have changed. There's been the Me Too movement, for a start. Then again, millions of American women have also lost the right to an abortion. So it kind of depends who you ask, because it's easy to pick and choose examples of how things have progressed or regressed for women. But the way people respond to Kamala Harris's campaign for president might give us some more clues.
Even after all the advances, after so many women being elected to office, there are challenges sometimes for women running.
The response to this question is indicative of the times, right? And if she wasn't running against Donald Trump, I probably would have a different answer. I definitely think that racism and sexism are a major part that she'll have to face and continues to face. But is America ready? I think America is more ready for someone who's pledged themselves to the democratic ideals than to President Donald Trump.